In fact, the last time in American history the national debt was completely paid off was in 1835 after President Andrew Jackson shut down the central bank that preceded the Federal Reserve. In fact, Jackson's entire political platform essentially revolved around his commitment to shut down the central bank, stating at one point, "The bold efforts the present bank has made to control the government are but premonitions of the fate that awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like it." Unfortunately, his message was short-lived, and the international bankers succeeded to install another central bank in 1913. The Federal Reserve, and as long as this institution exists, perpetual debt is guaranteed. Now, so far we have discussed the reality that money is created out of debt, through loans. These loans are based on a bank's reserves, and reserves are derived from deposits. And through this fractional reserve system, any one deposit can create 9 times its original value, in turn debasing the existing money supply, raising prices in society. And since all this money is created out of debt and circulated randomly through commerce, people become detached from their original debt, and a disequilibrium exists where people are forced to compete for labor in order to pull enough money out of the money supply to cover their costs of living. As dysfunctional and backwards as all of this might seem, there is still one thing we have omitted from this equation. And it is this element of the structure which reveals the truly fraudulent nature of the system itself: the application of interest. When the government borrows money from the Fed, or when a person borrows money from a bank, it almost always has to be paid back with accrued interest. In other words, almost every single dollar that exists must be eventually returned to a bank with interest paid as well. But if all money is borrowed from the central bank and is expanded by commercial banks through loans, only what would be referred to as the principal is being created in the money supply. So then, where is the money to cover all of the interest that is charged? Nowhere. It doesn't exist. The ramifications of this are staggering, for the amount of money owed back to the banks will always exceed the amount of money that is available in circulation. This is why inflation is a constant in the economy, for new money is always needed to help cover the perpetual deficit built into the system, caused by the need to pay the interest. What this also means is that mathematically, defaults and bankruptcy are literally built into the system, and there will always be poor pockets of society that get the short end of the stick. An analogy would be a game of musical chairs, for once the music stops, somebody is left out to dry. And that's the point. It invariably transfers true wealth from the individual to the banks. For if you are unable to pay for your mortgage, they will take your property. This is particularly enraging when you realize that not only is such a default inevitable due to the fractional reserve practice, but also because of the fact that the money that the bank loaned to you didn't even legally exist in the first place. In 1969, there was a Minnesota court case involving a man named Jerome Daly, who was challenging the foreclosure of his home by the bank which provided the loan to purchase it. His argument was that the mortgage contract required both parties, being he and the bank, each put up a legitimate form of property for the exchange. In legal language, this is called consideration. Mr. Daly explained that the money was, in fact, not the property of the bank, for it was created out of nothing as soon as the loan agreement was signed. Remember what modern money mechanics stated about loans? What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes in exchange for credits. Reserves are unchanged by the loan transactions, but deposit credits constitute new additions to the total deposits of the banking system. In other words, the money doesn't come out of their existing assets. The bank is simply inventing it, putting up nothing of its own, except for a theoretical liability on paper. As the court case progressed, the bank's president, Mr. Morgan, took the stand, and in the judge's personal memorandum, he recalled that The plaintiff, bank's president, admitted that, in combination with the Federal Reserve Bank, did create the money and credit upon its books by bookkeeping entry. The money and credit first came into existence when they created it. Mr. Morgan admitted that no United States law or statute existed which gave him the right to do this. A lawful consideration must exist and be tendered to support the note. The jury found that there was no lawful consideration, and I agree. He also poetically added, "Only God can create something of value out of nothing." And upon this revelation, the court rejected the bank's claim for foreclosure, and Daly kept his home. The implications of this court decision are immense. For every time you borrow money from a bank, whether it is a mortgage loan or a credit card charge, the money given to you is not only counterfeit, it is an illegitimate form of consideration, and hence voids the contract to repay, for the bank never had the money as property to begin with. Unfortunately, such legal realizations are suppressed and ignored, and the game of perpetual wealth transfer and perpetual debt continues. And this brings us to the ultimate question: why? During the American Civil War, President Lincoln bypassed the high-interest loans offered by the European banks and decided to do what the Founding Fathers advocated, which was to create an independent and inherently debt-free currency. It was called the greenback. Shortly after this measure was taken, an internal document circulated between private British and American banking interests stated, "Slavery is but the owning of labor, and carries with it the care of laborers, while the European plan is that capital shall control labor by controlling wages. This can be done by controlling the money. It will not do to allow the greenback, as we cannot control that." The fractional reserve policy perpetrated by the Federal Reserve, which has spread in practice to the great majority of banks in the world, is, in fact, a system of modern slavery. Think about it. Money is created out of debt. And what do people do when they are in debt? They submit to employment to pay it off. But if money can only be created out of loans, how can society ever be debt-free? It can't. And that's the point. And it is the fear of losing assets coupled with the struggle to keep up with the perpetual debt and inflation inherent in the system, compounded by the inescapable scarcity within the money supply itself, created by the interest that can never be repaid, that keeps the wage slave in line, running on the hamster wheel with millions of others, in effect powering an empire that truly benefits only the elite at the top of the pyramid. For, at the end of the day, who are you really working for? The banks. Money is created in a bank and invariably ends up in a bank. They are the true masters, along with the corporations and governments they support. Physical slavery requires people to be housed and fed. Economic slavery requires people to feed and house themselves. It is one of the most ingenious scams for social manipulation ever created, and at its core, it is an invisible war against the population. Debt is the weapon used to conquer and enslave societies, and interest is its prime ammunition. And as the majority walks around oblivious to this reality, the banks, in collusion with governments and corporations, continue to perfect and expand their tactics of economic warfare, spawning new bases, such as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, while also inventing a new type of soldier, the birth of the economic hitman.
In the last year and a half, I've gotten a lot of calls saying, you've got to read They Own It All, Including You, by Means of Toxic Currency by Ron Mcdonald and Robert Rowan, MD. And, I know a lot about the Federal Reserve. I've been studying for 17 years, and I think I don't need to read another book. But I finally did, and I said, well, we got to carry this. It's easy to understand. It gets in-depth into a lot of things that I was aware of, but the general public isn't, or your friends or family may not be. But it's really tied together well. And so I hope people will get it. It's They Own It All, Including You, by means of toxic currency. And it's available at Infowars.com, discounted, by the way. And he has the great quote, "I care not what puppet is placed in the throne of England to rule the empire. The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the money supply." That was Baron Nathan Mayer Rothschild of the Rothschild International Banking Cartel. And so to break down the book that I hope everybody gets, by the way, we got 800 of Charlotte Iserby's book. It's now out of print, and we sold out of them in less than a day. She said she had 100 or so more she's going to mail to us now. We'll have those available next week, and then that's it. It's out of print. So I'm sorry that we've had to remove that from the shopping cart. And thank you for the support, though. And you got a great book to wake people up now with the deliberate numbing down. It was selling everywhere else for $100, $200 because it's out of print. We sold it at retail, so it sold out pretty quick. But we'll have some signed copies next week to offer for folks. And again, thank you for supporting us all at Infowars.com on the online video bookstore. And don't forget PrisonPlanet.tv, the armory of resistance. The live video simulcast, the radio show, the archive, the higher quality audio podcast, my book, Paul Watson's book, both out of print. Dozens of new interviews, including an interview with the head of Skywatch on chemtrails, Dr. Blaylock. We got Dr. Conant coming up in the next few days, Russell Means. Just every week we're adding 3-4 exclusive interviews where we fly around the country and interview people. We're flying to interview Charlotte Iserby next week. I mean, we're really turning up the heat at PrisonPlanet.tv. Download them, burn them to disk. Every subject you can imagine, give them to people. Give a PrisonPlanet.tv membership. They're $5.95 a month, but every December for Christmas, for the holiday, you can get 5.3 months free. You buy a year, you pay for 6.7 months, you get 5.3 months free. So you get a yearly membership and get it a lot lower than $5.95 a month. Or you can do the trial, $5.95 a month, and that's how we're funding the operation. I want to commend all of you that are members, but use the site, share your username and passcode with those, that you trust. I wouldn't use a username or passcode that, gets into anything else of yours, but, we allow 6 people with the same username and passcode. You buy one membership, you basically get 6. 6 people can be simultaneously logged in under the same username and passcode. But again, as I've always told you, so we let folks share it with a limited number of people. It'd be unlimited, but we can't afford the bandwidth. Use a username and passcode that is only for PrisonPlanet.tv if you're going to share it. Send it as an e-card to friends and family. Hey, here's a member site with all these films and books. Here it is. So give yourself a gift and give some of your family the gift of a PrisonPlanet.tv membership. Or if you want to support us, buy a whole bunch of memberships and create easy, username and passcodes, and then give that to friends and family and say, here's your e-card or here's your physical card, here's your PrisonPlanet.tv membership, please use it. And a lot of folks will use it, but regardless, you'll be supporting our operation at PrisonPlanet.tv. And who can deny we're at the tip of the spear and having a huge effect? Now, no doubt I'll have him back up again because I'm a fan of the book. I haven't actually finished the whole thing, but I've read about 80% of it. It goes into John D. Rockefeller, the whole system. But in this abbreviated transmission, Ron McDonald, break down what the book covers and what you've discovered.
Well, probably the most important thing about the book is understanding the real defining of the term income. And what I've discovered is through a case that I had researched, I noted, and the case is $3,976.62 in currency and one Ford 1964 station wagon. In that case, this property was seized on the land in a Midwestern state. And what happened there is that the Internal Revenue Service got involved with that. And I looked for the authority of how they did that on the land. The seizure usually is out at sea. And this is a quote from the case. And it says, although presumably for the purpose of obtaining jurisdiction, action for forfeiture under Internal Revenue laws is commenced as proceeding in admiralty. After jurisdiction is obtained, proceeding takes on character of civil action at law, and at least at such stage of proceeding, rules of civil procedure control.
Well, let me stop you for a moment, Ron, because your phone's okay, but it's a little low, so try to speak right in the receiver. But I've seen this in cases where the feds are taking people's land for literally no reason or an adverse possession. They will declare admiralty and they will talk about it being maritime jurisdiction, or literally a quasi-private agency engaged in letter of marque, and you write your checks out to the private Federal Reserve. So that's where you're going with this, is that we do have this maritime criminal rogue group. Please continue.
Oh, absolutely. And the rules of civil procedure, I looked up, and actually it fell under Rule C of the Admiralty Rules of Court. And under that rule, it says for mere maritime hypothecation. Well, that's a very big...
yeah, now that your level's perfect, start over. Get into what you were reading with the Admiralty. Go ahead.
Okay. And, from the quote from that seizure or forfeiture on the land, I quote, although presumably for the purposes of obtaining jurisdiction, action for forfeiture under Internal Revenue laws is commenced as proceeding in Admiralty. After jurisdiction is obtained, proceeding takes on character of civil action at law. And at least at such stage of proceedings, rules of civil procedure control. Well, I researched the rules of civil procedure, but it led me to the actual rule, Rule C of the Admiralty Rules. And under that rule, it says for mere maritime hypothecation. Well, mere maritime hypothecation is a lien or the creditor's interest in something. This case talked about currency and a Ford station wagon. So understanding how they could seize both currency and Ford station wagon, they did it because there were liens on there. I'm going to break down what actual money is and currency is. The gold coin that was once the lawful coin of the realm here in America fell under the Mint Act of 1792. In that gold coin were an infinite number of qualities, inclusive of title, rights, and interest. When you use that gold coin to buy something, to purchase something, the title, rights, and interest transferred from the gold coin into the very thing you purchased. So now you had title, rights, and interest in that thing, whether it was a table or a house or whatever. However, with the Federal Reserve note, you have a lien in there. That's that mere maritime hypothecation.
And that's why the government holds the title to your car. Everything is basically like rented or through a feudal serf system.
Oh, absolutely. And with that lien in the Federal Reserve note, it transfers also because that's the quality and nature of currency, whether it's gold coin or whether it's Federal Reserve notes. And that lien transfers into the very thing, so when you buy a table for $10 Federal Reserve note, a lien of 100% owned by the creditor travels right into that table. And we understand this to be true because before 1933, in order for the state to seize anything from you, it had to go through the courts. And the courts were courts of law. Today, if you leave your car on the side or they arrest you, they seize it immediately. There's no longer are in touch with the common law courts. So we've lost that aspect of our society, of our liberty. In 1933, this actually happened, and I'm going to disregard everything that happened up to 1933, but it started at the commencement of the country. But in 1933, the President of the United States was given complete, unlimited control over economics in this country. That meant he had the right to control every aspect of the country's economy. And this was because they determined that competition was a scourge on society. That meant that to build a better mousetrap, cheaper mousetrap was no longer a good thing for the people.
Now, they want planned economies which vertically integrate all power to the elite's hands.
Absolutely. And you understand one thing about building a better mousetrap, whether it's a better car, whether it's better whatever, is that it actually increases the value of money in your pocket.
Yeah, the overall wealth of a nation, that's why then your money, if it's fiat, has value because it's all staked on the credit and faith. That's the system they moved us to, but now they've debased the nation itself because they're waging war against any independent wealth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we were told that to compete against each other, to build better things, to increase the money value in our pocket was basically a evil on our society. So the president was given unlimited power, and you have to question, well, his office is enumerated with power, so where did he get this extra power? This is the first breach of not the first, but it is a breach of the federal Constitution, because that power had to come from the judicial and from the Congress.
All right, Ron McDonald, co-author of They Own It All, including you, by means of toxic currency. He ties it all together. This is beyond just fractional reserve banking. This is their system of fraud, the net they've caught us in, available at Infowars.com. Stay with us. Okay, going back to Ron McDonald, the author of the book that other books have covered similar things but not tied it all together. It's really a masterpiece. They own it all, including you. Available at Infowars.com. It makes a great Christmas gift for your friends and family as well, to wake them up. Every mind we unlock is so valuable to the overall fight for liberty. You were getting up to the president and this false monetary system. Please continue.
In 1933 was a crucial point in the history of America because both the wealth and the law of the American people was stolen from them. And at that point, the president became a mini-government. The Congress gave the president the ability to legislate, to determine, and enforce the laws of economic control. And that meant he could, for example, he could license everyone, and that's what he did under the National Industrial Recovery Act.
And that's why they set up state police that were federally chartered and began the licensing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And licensing comes basically after, remember the aristocrats, and you probably saw it in Rob Roy and that?
Yeah, I mean, it's feudalism. You've got to have a license is the authorization to do something that's illegal, so traveling is illegal in America.
Right, and it's even more than that. It's the aristocrat being able to take your bride before you had her. That's what a licensure is. It's the ability of a sovereign...
Because he owned you like deer on his property, and prima noctu was practice.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So under that, we lost our law because what happened is administrative law came in. Under the National Industrial Recovery Act, that meant thousands of codes were adopted throughout the states, and that meant you had to conform to these codes. And the president then had the ability to regulate how many doctors would be licensed a year, how many pieces of china would be made, how they would be made, every facet of our society.
And now the global licensure is the Agenda 21.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then also with the stealing of the wealth of the American people, and I'll give you an example. In 1933, prior to the fiat currency, if you bought your house for $10,000, you had the title rights and interest in that house. But the very next day after the fiat money was enacted, now you had $10,000 of federal lien on. It was a swooping down of that valuation.
They turned wealth into debt with a sleight of hand.
Yes, without one shot being fired. But here's the issue on the income. What is income? When you think about it, let me ask you, with your state income tax and your federal income tax, I'm going to describe them differently. The state income tax is a domestic income tax form. It's whatever happens within the state. If that's the true nature of an income tax in the state, then what is that for the federal jurisdiction? I'm going to read one thing. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to the state, and that's Volume 20, Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 1785. So what is that federal income tax? It's international income tax form. How do you find yourself in international law? That's the law of the high seas, either Admiralty or Maritime. Admiralty being the contract on the high seas in a time of war, Maritime contract on the high seas in a time of peace.
And that's why they always redeclare emergencies every year, is to keep that going.
Absolutely. Well, here's the bottom line. The Federal Reserve is a foreign corporation. It is the creditor to the United States. And in Title 12, Section 411, it says that the Federal Reserve notes are obligations of the United States. That means the United States, the debtor, the Federal Reserve is the creditor. Now let's put ourselves in the picture. Well, let's go right to the ports of entry. Every time a merchant brings in merchandise into this country, there's a duty put on that merchandise, isn't there? And he's working under international law. Well, I just described that the Federal Reserve is a foreign corporation. It is the creditor of the United States. When you import a Federal Reserve note into your household, you now become a merchant, subject to international law, having to pay a duty on those products. And I heard that once. I heard the Federal Reserve call their merchandise products. Now, you're importing and exporting every month, importing the Federal Reserve into your household through your bank account, negotiating checks, what have you, and you export them out when you pay your PG&E, water bill, and everything else. That is the basis of income tax law. And if you read the Huntress, it'll tell you that revenue, and I probably should read it, it says, in this country, revenue causes have long been the subject of admiralty cognizance that the Congress considered them as civil causes of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. And to preclude any doubt that might arise, carefully added the clause, including, etc. This is clear proof that Congress considered these words to be used in the sense they bore. And the point is that all income tax is revenue. Revenue is income tax. It's foreign.
Well, that's why England calls their tax, the Inland Revenue System. Stay there. We'll be right back. Long segment coming up with our guest to continue breaking it down. We've only got one segment left with Ron McDonald, author of They Own It All, Including You, by Means of Toxic Currency. And I want to walk through this now in the 17 minutes or so we have, Ron, and get into the fact that they own you as well. And they hide this in plain view. That's why they call us human resources. That's why the globalists openly say there's too many of us. We're a negative asset. They want to get rid of us. So first there's the process of takeover and domestication. Now there is the ongoing wars, the starvation. That's in State Department Memorandum 200, that they want to reduce world population. Please continue breaking it down, all covered in the book. They Own It All, Including You, available at Infowars.com.
Well, definitely. And the bottom line with using those notes, and most of your listeners already know this, is that they're debtor's instruments. They do not pay off. They actually discharge debt from one to another to another. They give no title, rights, and interest in anything that you purchase, so everything that you have does not belong to you. When your wife gives birth to your child, you actually pay the hospital with these Federal Reserve notes. That lien travels all the way through right onto the baby's head, because that is the nature of what currency and what money is. It is the qualities within these instruments that flow through to the very thing that is purchased. Now, going back to the jurisdiction, considering what jurisdiction we're in, most of us think that we're in the common law jurisdiction. Probably not your listeners, but most Americans do. If you ask them, is that Federal Reserve note the money of the United States, they say, certainly. They don't know that it is not domestic currency. They have no idea it's foreign currency. It would be like if we were to import Japanese yen right over here right now and fill our entire system with Japanese yen, American people would be up in arms. But because they call it a Federal Reserve note, no one is aware that it's a foreign product not owned by the United States, not owned by you. It's owned by the Federal Reserve. And I guarantee you, if you try and take out 10,000 or more Federal Reserve out of this country, you've broken the law if you don't declare it. Or if you pay your property tax with them over 10,000, there's a red flag that goes up. Or if you put more than 10,000 at a bank, there's a red flag that goes up.
And let's briefly talk about that. What's happening here is we think of the dollar as the world reserve currency. That's not a greenback, a U.S. government-issued fiat. That is a private Federal Reserve fiat. And so when we hear about the dollar crisis worldwide, that's a fiat private banker crisis. They're using this system to control the world as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's in every country. It doesn't matter the nature of the currency. None of it is backed by a commodity that the people themselves own. And that's the one thing that people's eyes should be focused on. Do you actually own that you're using? Well, no, you don't. And again, there was a quote in the New Testament that says, "None shall buy nor sell without the mark of the beast." Well, you have to consider that the mark of the beast is invisible. It has to be invisible. It would be the very nature of money. And when you examine that prophecy, it is a commercial prophecy, isn't it? Buying and selling is commerce. So you would have to look into that jurisdiction to see where that mark of the beast is. Well, here it is. It's right out there in the open. It is a lien that travels all the way around. There's not one product, not one service in this country that isn't now liened. They own it all, including you, because we exist purely by means of this toxic currency.
So he makes all take it, both free, both slave, great, small, everyone uses it.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether you believe or don't believe in a religion or not. This is a commercial prophecy. It merely is the law of as far-reaching as Babylon itself. It's the merchant law. That's all it is. But when we go through society, there's something that one should be aware of. Being in common law meant the law of the land came and arose from the land itself. That's The law of the land is common law. That's why it's stated like that. But when you're driving down, or let's say you go to register a vehicle, you'll see it from the DMV. You'll be given a form, and it'll say vehicle / vessel. Well, that backslash means equality. That means they mean the same thing. Well, that should be your first clue that the jurisdictions are mixed right there. The land or the sea is mixed right on there. But are they? When you're driving down the highway in your car, do you not pass islands in the middle of the street? Are there painted islands? Are there raised islands? And what about those lanes called shipping lanes? Do you see the truck going down there with the cargo? And when that truck goes back and starts delivering its cargo, it backs up into a bay, which could be in the middle of a state, no water around, and unloads the cargo onto the dock. And what does the driver do? He hands over a bill of lading. Now, if you were to find the bill of lading, you can look in a law dictionary, and it'll say, for goods on a vessel. Now, did they confuse the terminology there? If you were to look up weighs bill, if you had a weighs bill, it would be goods on land. You see the nature of where we are right now?
But let me back up what you're saying here, because I've read the SPP documents that Judicial Watch sued and got. I've studied the inland ports at Kansas City and Dallas, Texas, and other areas. They admit that that's what the NAFTA superhighways are international jurisdiction taxation lanes and corridors that they admit is the international takeover of our country. So this is all actually admitted.
Yeah, and it's like I said, with the merchant law, highways were lanes, shipping lanes on the high seas. And back in the 50s, they changed all roads, all boulevards, all avenues into highways. And you have to ask why did they do that? Because what they did was bring into the system the Admiralty, Maritime, or the Commerce jurisdiction. And even your previous commercial says we'll ship anywhere, ship. If you go to the post office after you leave, it says thank you for your shipping, and you may have just mailed a letter across to a neighbor for a birthday. How are you involved in shipping when you're on the land?
And that's how the feds have the postal laws, and this is all admitted. That's what's incredible. When you go to court, it's all that Roman law, praying to the court in your pleadings. It's all there in front of everyone, the ancient merchant law, and any good lawyer knows this, and it's supplanting the common law.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been separated from our common law, and the only way a man can defend is through his common law. That's where he actually gets his alienable rights and everything else. But when you put out to sea, then you have all the laws, all the immunities, all the privileges come from the admiral. And that's where we are right now, and that's why we're in regulatory law. And everything is regulated. If you go through society, just count the things that you cannot do without permission. You cannot go through the intersection when it has to stop there without permission. You can't get into your car unless you have a license. You can't build a house unless you have a permit. You can't get married unless you have a license. It is unbelievable how restrained Americans are, and they think they have liberty. It's not there.
And now we're entering an intensification in this phase where they are really expanding this international private corporate jurisdiction with their admirals, Janet Napolitano, the regional governor, the 10 governors over the 10 FEMA regions, the government in the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, admitting there's a takeover. You have these cities within a city. You have London, the city of London within London, who admittedly is its own private corporate sovereign land. You have the Vatican, that's its own private corporate sovereign land and set up the EU. You have the Washington, D.C., this command base, this district of the Admiralty. And what's incredible is you read globalist reports that are public. This is common knowledge to them, but you tell the general public this. You tell a state police officer that they're really a Admiralty agent and an enforcer of an offshore bank, they can't even understand you. But it's absolute fact.
Oh, absolutely. And, I'll give you an example. Here in the state of California, where I am, they have two codes in the government codes. One is 6850, and I'll quote it. It says, the money of accounts of this state is the dollar, the cent, and the mill. Well, they're referring back to the weight of gold or silver. That's what the money of account of California is. But it also says in 6852, it says all legal tender notes issued by the United States, and I emphasize issued by the United States, shall be received at par in payment for all taxes due this state or to any county or municipal corporation of this state. Now understand, it says issued by the United States. Is the Federal Reserve note issued by the United States? It's issued to the United States from the Federal Reserve. There is no law in the state of California, and I've researched them all the codes and statutes, that says they have a right to accept Federal Reserve notes or foreign product into this state. See, that's a crucial point, and that's in every state.
And that's how they expand the Commerce Clause way outside its jurisdiction, is because when your state starts accepting that private product, you, through contract, are consenting to it. Just like they say, hey, when you try to fly, we're allowed to stick our hands down your pants and radiate you because you consented.
You're absolutely on point. That's the bottom line. When you go and you're hired by an employer, you agree to accept Federal Reserve notes, $8 an hour, $10 an hour, whatever it is. You've agreed to it, but...
And they have the minimum wage law, which then allows them to control individuals contracting with each other. They're taking over every facet of society, including the family, which they admit is their main target.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And as far as do we own property, here it is right here in Senate document number 43, Senate Resolution 62, page 9, paragraph 2, April 17th, 1933, same year that we went off the gold standard. And I quote, "The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government, example, law amounting to mere user. And use must be in accordance with the law and subordinate to the necessities of the state." Now, the state is not necessarily your state; it's the creditor is the state in this thing.
And notice, when you get software, you are not the owner; you are the user. When you buy a car now, you don't buy it. They hold, as we said earlier, they hold the title. You are the user. We are literally feudal serfs and slaves. All this is a 21st century version of ancient feudalism that was operated the same way in Japan, Babylon, Albion, which is England. It's the same system.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the bottom line. And this is what you tax on, using the product. Not on the product itself, but the use of the product. And the bottom line to all this is an unconscionable contract, because ask any American, and they honestly believe that that is real money of the United States. They have no clue it is not their money.
And a contract executed in fraud by either party is null and void under every common law system globally.
Again, absolutely. And at the bottom line of the contract, when someone deals to you a worthless instrument for your actual labor, that is criminal conversion, isn't it?
And that's what happened in 1913. They got the Federal Reserve. They got rid of our senators being state-controlled. They brought in the income tax. That was the true coup d'etat, the beachhead. 33, total receivership. Since then, we are under total foreign banking cartel. And from your research, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Dutch royalty, Queen of England ownership, and they're eugenicists, and now they just want us off their land. They see us as rats that are overbreeding, and so they're now poisoning our water supply and food, gauging, if we'll notice, as half the people on your block get diabetes or die of cancer.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the difference between a Federal Reserve note and a gold coin, if you put a lawful gold coin in a mason jar and held it for 20 years, it would still be the same amount. It would not duplicate itself. It would not increase. But take that Federal Reserve note that draws interest every second of every day, put it in a mason jar. If it's $20 Federal Reserve note, in 10 years it will have doubled, tripled, or whatever, because it has a rising debt to it.
Yeah, to explain that, 5,000 years ago, a man could buy the finest, suit of clothes for 1 gold ounce coin. You could still buy, a very nice suit and clothes for that 1 gold coin. And again, people get confused. They go, well, why do I buy gold? Okay, it was $300 8 years ago. Now it's 14 plus 100. But how do I buy things with it? At the point you unfreeze the gold, cash it in for the fiat, and now you've stopped the bankers from cheating you out of your savings.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I can't continue without saying how they defined the income tax on the first case, and what's called Bruce Shaver versus Union Pacific Railroad, 240 U.S. 1 at a 1916 case. And the constitutionality of the income tax was pursued, and it is this case, and the government of the United States cites as to the constitutionality of the income tax. I'm going to quote what Chief Justice White said, and I quote, "The appellate filed his bill to enjoin or command the corporation from complying with income tax provision of the Tariff Act of October 3rd, 1913. Most people reading that wouldn't understand what was just said there. But he identified the tax as a tariff. You know what a tariff is?
Yeah, it's a foreign corporate government putting a tariff on us. I mean, this is total economic domination. I'm going to have you back up for a full hour to take calls in the near future. The book is They Own It All, Including You, by Means of Toxic Currency, Ron McDonald and Robert Rowan, MD. It's a thick book, but an easy read. It's about 220 pages long. It's very well documented. Everybody needs this. You think you know it all about the Federal Reserve System, folks? I learned a lot from this book, and I hope you'll go to Infowars.com and get it, or simply call 888-253-3139. Buy one for yourself. Give one as a gift. Give it to local bankers you know. Most of them don't know, because they are now using this to remove the actual resources from us. This is very predatory. These people are extremely dangerous. As you're now seeing, we're coming to the end of this phase. It's only going to get crazier from here. Knowledge is power. The people perish for lack of knowledge, as Jesus Christ said. This book, They Own It All, Including You, available at Infowars.com. We've got about a minute left, Ron. In closing, how do we get out of this? How do we extricate ourselves?
Well, the first thing the people have to do is look at their states as their own home. This is your house. Clean it up. If all 50 states were to start tackling their own states and not worry about the other states, we would take back this country within a month. There's no doubt in my mind. We have to change the nature of currency to an honest money system, and we can do that.
Well, if you look at the Homeland Security Grid, the John Ward Defense Authorization Act, and all the rest of it, it's all designed and stated to suppress the states, to remove governors. I mean, because they know our legitimate redress is to take the states back and then take the central government back. Yes.
Well, there are a lot of remedies to this, including how to get your state to act. And that would have to be for another show.
Yeah, I'm going to have you back on, because I know you've got a really good idea that you've been promoting. And we'll get you back either the first of the year or even in the next few weeks. Ron McDonald, thank you so much. And, of course, Robert Rowan, also MD, you're a co-author. Great job. They own it all, including you. Hope you get it, folks. Infowars.com or 888-253-3139. Ron, we'll talk to you again soon. Great job. And let me say bye to you during the break.